Picture this, the Mekong River basin, stretching across the Cambodian landscape like a serpent of life and commerce. From above, it appears almost idyllic. The waterway carving through lush greenery, its banks painted in shades of emerald and jade. The scene evokes tranquility, a postcard of untouched natural beauty. But look closer, and you'll discover that beneath this serene exterior lies a world of hidden challenges. The forests flanking these waters are home to creatures that inspire both awe and fear. Venomous serpents that slip silently through the undergrowth, insects whose bites can incapacitate, and predators that have ruled these territories for millennia. Beneath the river's surface, the story is no different. The waters harbor their own caste of dangerous inhabitants, creatures that locals have learned to respect and outsiders quickly learn to fear. For generations, communities on opposite banks of this mighty river have called this challenging landscape home. They've adapted, survived, and even thrived despite the obstacles nature has placed before them. But one challenge has persisted, shaping daily life and limiting opportunity: the river itself. For decades, if you lived on one side of the Mekong here and needed to reach the other, you had exactly one option: a small boat. During the dry season, this worked well enough. But when the monsoons arrived, transforming the gentle current into a churning torrent, that simple crossing became a gamble with death. Boats capsized, lives were lost, families were separated, commerce ground to a halt. Today, however, something extraordinary is taking shape on this river. A transformation funded by a $200 million investment from China. A structure that represents more than just concrete and steel. It symbolizes connectivity, opportunity, and the changing geopolitical landscape of Southeast Asia. Welcome to the story of Cambodia's longest bridge and the ripple effects it will send across an entire region. Before we dive into the engineering marvel taking shape across the Mekong, we need to understand why this bridge matters so profoundly to Cambodia. Let's start with Kratie Province, situated in Cambodia's northeastern corner. This city of roughly 80,000 people sits perched along the Mekong River, its identity inseparable from the waterway that defines it. Kratie has built its economy around two primary assets: its ecological tourism potential and its strategic position along one of Southeast Asia's most important rivers. The Kratie port tells much of this story. Connected to Phnom Penh port through the vast Mekong River network, this facility processes an enormous volume of cargo daily. To put this in perspective, Phnom Penh port handles approximately 1/4 of Cambodia's entire national cargo volume. Kratie Port serves as the primary processing and transshipment hub for the region, particularly for agricultural products flowing from the interior provinces. The numbers are striking. In 2023 alone, Kratie Port accounted for more than 60% of the entire province's water transportation throughput. Every single day, thousands of tons of goods, primarily agricultural commodities, cross the river, moving from the productive farmlands of central and western Cambodia toward markets both domestic and international. And here's where the bridge story really begins. Cambodia's economy rests heavily on agriculture. This isn't just a significant sector, it's the backbone of the nation's livelihood. The central and western regions contain over 80,000 square kilometers of fertile plains, blessed with rich soil and abundant water resources. The Mekong River alone delivers more than 65 billion cubic meters of water annually to these agricultural zones, making intensive farming not just possible, but remarkably productive. In recent years, the Cambodian government has launched ambitious agricultural modernization initiatives. Their million-ton rice export plan aims to position Cambodia as a major player in global rice markets. They've encouraged farmers to adopt modern technologies, invested in rice milling infrastructure, and worked to increase overall production capacity. But there's been one persistent, frustrating obstacle preventing Cambodia from realizing its full agricultural potential. That same river that gives life to the fields has become a barrier to moving the harvest to market. If you wanted to transport goods from the western agricultural heartland to the ports in Crete, you essentially had two options, neither of them good. You could load everything onto small boats and ferry it across, slow, limited in capacity, and dangerous during bad weather. Or you could take the long way around by road, adding hundreds of kilometers, burning fuel, wasting time, and watching your profit margins evaporate with every extra mile. For farmers trying to get perishable goods to market, this wasn't just inconvenient, it was economically devastating. For tourists trying to explore the region, it meant limited access to some of Cambodia's most beautiful landscapes. For businesses considering investment in the area, it represented an infrastructure gap too significant to ignore. Cambodia's government recognized this problem years ago. They knew that bridging the Mekong here would unlock enormous economic potential. But there was one small problem. Building a bridge of this scale would require an investment Cambodia simply couldn't afford. So Cambodia went looking for help. They approached various countries and international financial institutions, presenting the project and hoping to find a willing partner. The response? Well, it was mostly silence, or just polite refusals. The reason was simple economics. Building a bridge in this location presented enormous engineering challenges. The Mekong here is wide and powerful, with complex underwater terrain that would make construction exceptionally difficult and expensive. The return on investment would be slow. This wasn't a toll bridge in a major urban corridor that would immediately generate revenue. This was infrastructure investment in a developing region where, honestly, the economic benefits would materialize gradually over decades. For most potential investors, the math just didn't work. The technical difficulties were too daunting, the costs too high, the timeline too long, and the financial returns too uncertain. Cambodia's bridge dream seemed destined to remain just that, a dream. Then, in 2022, someone in the Cambodian government made a suggestion. Why not approach China? The timing, as it turned out, was perfect. After rounds of negotiations between Cambodian officials and Chinese representatives, a Shanghai-based construction company agreed to take on the project. The deal was structured as follows. China would provide $200 million in funding to complete not just a bridge, but an entire transportation corridor. So, let's break down what that $200 million would actually build. The centerpiece is the Crete-Mekong River Bridge, a structure stretching more than 1,700 meters across the river with a bridge deck 13.5 meters wide. But the funding doesn't stop there. That $200 million covers the bridge itself, plus approximately 33.5 kilometers of connecting highway infrastructure, creating a complete transportation corridor that would seamlessly integrate with Cambodia's existing road network. The project officially broke ground in January 2023, with completion targeted for September 2025, an ambitious timeline of just over 2.5 years for a project of this complexity. The bridge's starting point connects to National Highway 7 in Crete City. Its endpoint links to the planned National Highway 60B. But here's where the project's true strategic significance becomes clear. This isn't just a bridge connecting two sides of a river in Cambodia. This structure is designed to become a crucial node in a much larger transportation network, eventually linking Cambodia with Laos, Vietnam, and Thailand. In other words, this bridge is being built to serve as an international transportation hub, facilitating the movement of goods and people across multiple Southeast Asian nations, which brings us to the obvious question that many observers worldwide have been asking. Why would China commit $200 million to build infrastructure in Cambodia? To understand China's motivations, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture of how infrastructure development works in the developing world. Countries like Cambodia face a fundamental challenge. They desperately need modern infrastructure, roads, bridges, ports, power plants, to unlock their economic potential. But they lack the financial resources to build these projects independently. A single bridge can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. A national highway system can run into the billions. For a developing nation with competing priorities and limited budgets, these numbers are simply beyond reach. So these countries have two options. They can wait, hoping their economies will eventually grow enough to self-fund infrastructure. Or they can seek external investment, exchanging access, resources, or future economic cooperation for immediate construction help. Cambodia has clearly chosen the second path. By the end of 2024, Cambodia's total public debt sat between $12 billion and $12.3 billion. Here's the striking detail. Nearly 99% of this debt is foreign debt, totaling approximately $11.9 to $12 billion. This debt structure reveals Cambodia's strategy. They're deliberately choosing to leverage international partnerships and resource agreements to accelerate their infrastructure development rather than waiting decades to build everything with domestic funding alone. From China's perspective, the calculation is equally clear. For years, Beijing has prioritized deepening its engagement with Southeast Asia. The region represents not just a massive market for Chinese goods, but also a zone of strategic importance that sits along vital trade routes connecting China to the broader world. Southeast Asian nations offer something China urgently needs: partnership opportunities that allow Beijing to expand its regional influence while simultaneously securing access to resources and markets. Countries willing to cooperate, with significant development potential and rich natural resources, hold enormous strategic value. And Cambodia checks all these boxes. Let's talk about one resource in particular: iron ore. Cambodia possesses substantial iron ore reserves, particularly in regions like Phnom Deck and Banteay Minchi. Current estimates place total reserves at approximately 7 million tons, with ore grades between 51 and 56% iron content, relatively high-quality material. Now consider China's appetite for iron ore. In 2024 alone, China imported approximately 1.237 billion tons of iron ore, representing a 4.9% increase year over year and setting a new record. These imports account for roughly 72% of all iron ore traded globally. China's economy runs on steel, and steel requires iron ore. Securing reliable, long-term access to iron ore sources is a strategic priority for Beijing. Building infrastructure that helps countries like Cambodia develop their mining sectors and transport resources more efficiently serves China's resource security objectives. So when China agreed to fund this bridge project, mineral resources were absolutely part of the calculation. But it would be a mistake to reduce this to a simple resource for infrastructure exchange. The reality is more nuanced. China is making a long-term investment in regional connectivity, influence, and economic integration, with resource access being one component of a much broader strategic vision. Still, agreeing to fund a bridge and actually building it in one of Southeast Asia's most challenging environments are two very different things. The Mekong River at this location is not a gentle stream. It's a powerful waterway with substantial flow, complex underwater terrain, and seasonal variations that can dramatically alter conditions. Building a bridge here would test even the most experienced engineering teams. China's construction crews, however, have built a global reputation for tackling exactly these kinds of impossible projects. From high-altitude railways in Tibet to massive bridge systems spanning wide rivers and ocean channels, Chinese engineers have repeatedly demonstrated their ability to overcome extreme environmental challenges. But knowing how to solve difficult problems in theory and actually solving them in practice are different things. The Craty Bridge would require innovation. One of the first major challenges was underwater construction, specifically the installation of the massive steel casings that would form the foundation for the bridge piers. The standard equipment and techniques used for this work in more developed regions weren't readily available in Cambodia. The construction team couldn't simply import every piece of specialized machinery. Costs would skyrocket and logistical nightmares would multiply. So the engineering team got creative. After 3 consecutive days of intensive technical discussions, they developed a solution: modify existing crane barges to achieve precise placement of underwater steel casings. This adaptation effectively solved the resource limitation problem, allowing the team to use available equipment in innovative ways, rather than waiting for specialized machinery to be shipped from China. But underwater foundations were just the beginning. The bridge superstructure itself presented its own set of engineering challenges. Consider the numbers. A structure spanning more than 1,700 meters requires multiple support piers positioned throughout the river to carry the load. If these piers are inadequately designed or improperly spaced, the bridge won't simply fail immediately. Instead, it will gradually weaken under the constant stress of traffic, particularly heavy commercial vehicles. A typical transport truck can weigh 30,000 kilograms or more when fully loaded. Now imagine thousands of these vehicles crossing the bridge every day, year after year. Every crossing creates stress. Every stress cycle slightly weakens the structure. Over decades, inadequate design would lead to catastrophic failure. To prevent this, the Chinese engineering team deployed specialized equipment, several 1,000-ton transport and erection integrated machines. These massive pieces of machinery serve dual functions. First, they can transport prefabricated bridge sections weighing up to 1,000 tons. Second, they can precisely position and install these sections with millimeter accuracy. Each of these machines rolls on 88 wheels that distribute the enormous weight of the bridge components they carry. They're specifically designed for constructing bridges in complex terrain, capable of handling spans up to 40 meters long and compatible with various standard span lengths like 24 and 32 meters. The bridge design itself incorporates sophisticated engineering solutions. The team opted for a variable cross-section pre-stressed concrete continuous rigid frame combination system. In simpler terms, this means the bridge structure varies in thickness and strength along its length, with each section precisely engineered for the specific loads it will experience at that location. The approach minimizes material use while maximizing structural integrity. The main bridge piers, those massive vertical structures rising from the riverbed to support the bridge deck, use a box pier design, which provides excellent strength-to-weight ratios. The side piers use solid pier bodies for additional stability. The approach bridges, which connect the main span to the land on either side, utilize prefabricated T-beams in spans of 30 meters and 50 meters. These prefabricated components are no joke. A single 30-meter beam weighs approximately 70 tons, while the 50-meter beams tip the scales at around 90 tons each. Lifting, transporting, and precisely positioning components this massive requires not just powerful equipment, but also, exceptional coordination and planning. Throughout the construction process, the Chinese team introduced technological innovations to improve both efficiency and quality. They developed an automatic pile drilling device that enhanced the traditional impact drilling system, which improved the stability of underwater piling operations and boosted construction efficiency by more than 20%. For the steel reinforcement cages that form the skeleton of concrete piers, they deployed fully automatic CNC steel cage winding machines. This automation dramatically improved the quality and consistency of these critical foundation components. One of the most technically demanding aspects of the construction involved the cantilever casting method used for the main span. This technique requires setting up working platforms on both sides of completed piers, then progressively casting concrete segments that extend outwards symmetrically. Each segment must be precisely positioned and secured before the next can be added. The anchoring systems that hold these temporary structures in place during construction must withstand enormous pressures, both from the weight of the bridge sections being built and from the additional loads imposed by construction equipment and materials. The final connection, where the two cantilever sections meet in the middle of the span, requires millimeter-level precision. The segments must align perfectly to ensure the completed bridge functions as a single, continuous structure rather than sections that might shift or separate under load. Every detail, from the initial riverbed surveys to the final deck paving, reflects the professional capabilities and technical sophistication of the Chinese engineering team. As of July 2025, the bridge has achieved a major milestone: successful closure of the main span. The construction progress of the primary bridge structure now stands at approximately 96% complete. Barring unexpected setbacks, the bridge is on track for completion within the original timeline. But the Mekong River Bridge isn't the only major infrastructure project China is undertaking in Cambodia. In fact, there's an even larger, more ambitious project currently underway: the Techo Funan Canal. This canal represents something truly transformative for Cambodia. The complete waterway will stretch 180 kilometers, with a width of 100 meters and a depth of 5.4 meters. These dimensions are carefully calculated to accommodate vessels with displacements up to 3,000 tons, serious commercial shipping capacity. The project timeline spans 4 years, with full completion expected in 2028. The total investment, $1.7 billion, making this the single largest infrastructure project in Cambodia's modern history. Why does this matter so much? Because the Techo Funan Canal will create a direct waterway connection from Phnom Penh, Cambodia's capital, to the sea. Currently, Cambodian shipping relies heavily on passage through Vietnamese ports and waterways. This dependency creates several problems. Cambodia pays substantial fees for access to these facilities, faces potential political leverage from Vietnam, and has limited control over the efficiency and reliability of its own shipping operations. The canal changes this equation dramatically. Official projections suggest that once operational, the canal will reduce Cambodia's shipping traffic through Vietnam by approximately 70%. This translates to roughly $88 million in annual transportation revenue for Cambodia initially, with projections suggesting this could reach $570 million annually by 2050. Perhaps more importantly, Cambodia's shipping costs will decrease by roughly 1/3 because they'll no longer need to pay Vietnamese transit fees. For a developing economy where margins matter enormously, this represents a significant competitive advantage. The Techo Funan Canal will give Cambodia what it has never had: genuine, secure, independent access to global maritime trade routes. To fully understand what's happening with these infrastructure projects, we need to step back and look at the broader strategic context. Over the past decade, China has been methodically, systematically building its position across Southeast Asia. This isn't happening by accident or on impulse. It's a calculated, long-term strategy based on cold, geopolitical reality. Southeast Asia occupies one of the most strategically valuable positions on Earth. The region sits at the intersection of Asia, Australia, the Pacific Ocean, and the Indian Ocean. Control significant influence in Southeast Asia, and you control access to some of the world's most important trade routes. For China, strong relationships in Southeast Asia mean more convenient and secure shipping lanes to Australia and the broader Pacific. It means enhanced influence in regional affairs, from economic policy to security arrangements. It means a buffer zone of friendly nations rather than potential adversaries. The numbers tell the story. Of the world's 16 most strategically important maritime passages, China now has significant influence over 3. This dramatically enhances China's voice in Pacific regional affairs, and crucially, gives Beijing leverage over nations that depend heavily on these trade routes. Consider Japan and South Korea, two economic powerhouses whose economies are fundamentally built on exports and imports. Both nations must move enormous volumes of goods through waters where China's regional influence is substantial. This creates a degree of economic interdependence that translates into political and strategic considerations. For export-oriented economies throughout East Asia, the Western Pacific Gateway, where China's influence is strongest, is directly linked to their economic survival. This reality shapes diplomatic calculations in capitals across the region. Naturally, this shift in regional dynamics makes Western powers, particularly the United States, deeply uncomfortable. Whenever China announces a major infrastructure cooperation project with a Southeast Asian nation, Western media and politicians typically respond with a predictable pattern. Concerns about debt traps, warnings about Chinese influence, and calls for these nations to reconsider their partnerships. Behind closed doors, there's often direct diplomatic pressure, suggestions that cooperation with China might impact relationships with Western nations, or hints that alternative financing might be available if only these countries would reconsider their Chinese partnerships. But here's the thing, these interventions generally haven't worked. Take Malaysia as a concrete example. In 2025, China and Malaysia reached comprehensive cooperation agreements covering an impressive range of sectors: artificial intelligence development, intellectual property protection frameworks, agricultural product exports, mutual visa exemptions for travelers, even giant panda conservation programs and railway infrastructure projects. This breadth of cooperation demonstrates something important. Most Southeast Asian nations are more interested in practical, mutually beneficial partnerships that deliver tangible results than in choosing sides in a great power competition.